Twitter.
And we are live.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Welcome.
I don't even know if there's anyone in chat.
I don't know. That's why I'm twittering. Retweet. Actually, I should retweet a comment and say something nice about stats. Dungeon Dragon. I mean, that's not. Yeah, I'm gonna hit
the whole situation. The whole situation with Mike Merles, you mean?
Well, the whole situation with Mike Merles is terrible. It's awful. But I was going to dunk on their stat line.
Yes. Yeah. It's, yeah.
Yeah. It's bad. And it's a template for like every other game, but it sucks so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully there are people who are going to jump in here. I'm seeing 2 concurrent viewers, but that could be us.
It's not me. So, I can't be bothered.
Okay. Yes. I never watch myself. If you are in chat and you can hear us, by all means, please say something. Make yourself known. At some point, we'll be asking for questions. And welcome to the very first live stream on my YouTube channel.
Yay!
Yeah. A little over a month ago, I didn't even have a YouTube channel, and all of a sudden I'm live streaming on it. So this is exciting.
You could do it.
I've made it. I've discovered this YouTube thing probably like 10 years too late.
Everybody's on Twitch now, dude.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to make sure that the technology was solid and that I didn't have to do too much in the way of troubleshooting and figuring things out. So no, I'm pretty confident that this YouTube thing is here to stay now.
Yeah. It's the test of time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, welcome to our live chat stream. If you are here and you want to say something or ask a question, please do just type it in chat. We're more than happy to answer your questions. But I'm here with my friend Kat McDonald of Peach Garden Games, and we're going to talk about tabletop gaming stuff. As you may have already. Specifically, definitely going to talk about ability scores in tabletop games and why D&D sucks at them.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the Mike Merles situation as well. We'll talk about a few other things, but yeah. So why do you think that the D&D ability system sucks, Kat?
Because it's bad. Okay. Whenever a game has stats, that's the game designer's way of saying these are the things that are different about people from person to person. Sorry, my audio. And from person to person, and it's important. That is to say, there are measurable differences in strength between people, and that's important. That comes up over the course of the game. It matters. In other words.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion that there's measurable differences between people in intelligence is bad. just that notion alone is ableist. It's not good. There's no such thing as a concrete, measurable intellect. And even if there were, who cares? Who cares?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Like D&D has said that people have different strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. That these are measurable, objectively measurable, and that they matter. And I disagree on almost all those counts. It's bad.
Yeah, you're absolutely. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, yeah, intelligence is like we can't even accurately define it. Never mind defining it in a game. And then they grasp onto something even more nebulous like wisdom, and say that wisdom can be quantified, and it's like well, wisdom tells us that no, it really can't.
Also, the difference between intelligence and wisdom is a degree, I think, which is a little classist.
Yeah. I mean, I can certainly understand why they did it in the first place. If you have a game with clergy in it, obviously you need to give them some way of saying, well, I'm a little bit better at clergying than you are. So, in order to be able to decide if your party's cleric can stand up to the big bad guy cleric and whatnot. But yeah, like it's a bad measurement for it. Call of Cthulhu, I think, does a better thing where they also still have intelligence, but they also give a knowledge rating. And they actually break apart the notion that your intelligence has any effect on your on like how much you can know, which has always begged the question for me. Then, like, well, why doesn't just Call of Cthulhu get rid of intelligence and just go with knowledge?
Because games have to have it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. D&D set up this unassailable six that virtually every game uses now.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest change people try to make is when they add comeliness, and that's even less objectively measurable. I don't even know.
Why
or what.
Exactly. And then, I mean, adding comeliness as a stat in second edition opened up this whole different thing of, well, now we're getting into, we were ableist before, and now we're shunting aside people who are aromantic and asexual, and we're getting into because now we're making like physical beauty and sexual attractiveness a stat in the game, and it's why
and not just people who are on the aerospec, but also just different looking people. Like everybody's into different stuff, and you can't do a stat for that.
Exactly.
That's bananas.
And then, I mean, and they're so tied to having these 6 statistics that they kept them in 5th edition, even though they are useless. Like, they serve no functional purpose once you've generated them. And it's been this way for a while, actually. It's the 3.5. Pathfinder is the same, like all of the games. Once you've generated that statistic, so you've generated your 18 strength, and you can point at your 18 strength on your character sheet, and everyone can stare admiringly at it. But that 18 doesn't do anything in the game. At no point later on do you roll against it. At no point do you roll a D5 and add it to your 18, like anything like that. What it does is it generates the +4 to your D20 roll.
It's just
so. Yeah. So then really the number that's important is that bonus. And so why don't you just generate the bonuses at character generation? And it's like, I get a you know, a +4 in this, a +2 in this, a -1 in this thing over here.
It's less.
And then you're actually, yeah. It's, well, maybe it would be easier for players to understand, because I've actually had new players who were confused as like, so why did I roll these numbers up? Oh, it's so you know what your ability scores are. It's like, will they be used for anything? Oh no, your bonuses.
Yeah.
And it's the most common mistake is that it's okay, roll a d20 and add your strength bonus. Okay, so I rolled a 12 and my strength is 16, so that's 28. No, your strength bonus, not your...
Yeah. Your strength is 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's... And when I first started D&D, I worked really hard to remember the difference, and I had to study that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when I started, the ability scores were actually used. Like, basing D&D was a roll under system. So if you had a 16 strength and you needed to attack somebody, your attack roll was to like roll a d20, or if you were to, sorry, not attack rolls, if you were to try and do something like lift a door, or or break something, the DM would just say roll a d20 and roll under your strength, and that was that was an actual like useful statistic, even though they're all ableist and awful and
like strength. If you look at world-class weightlifters, the differences in strength aren't like objectively this guy's stronger than this guy. But just this guy can squat more, this guy can press more. Like
yeah,
it's not measurable. Even the one that's closest to being measurable is not measurable.
No,
it's banana.
No, I mean, you can't even, like, dexterity really isn't quantifiable. It's like you're quick, but are you quick how? Can you move your entire body? Do you just have excellent hand-eye coordination? Like, is that... The only thing you can measure in relation to that is speed, because you can legitimately say, okay, well, I took out a stopwatch and these two people ran like this distance, and one of them did it faster. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, then that person is faster. But
we have the world's fastest man.
Yeah,
he exists. He's perfect. Yes. He's wonderful. The other thing is that having something as a stat is a way of saying that it matters. And when was the last time it mattered which of your friends could lift more?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't. Even if you're talking like high stress situations, it's not usually that important.
No, and you're right. I mean, it's basically served as the template. Now every other game, as much as they try and get away from it, has locked themselves into, well, we have to quantify mental ability, we have to quantify physical ability, and we have to quantify some third ephemeral thing. We'll call it spirit, or, and every game has their way of sort of either simplifying that process or dividing it very finely.
Unsimplifying. Complicating.
But yeah. So what's the solution then? What if we agree that we hate ability scores, and we obviously do. What then is the solution to that?
I mean, the solution as a game designer is never to take anything from D&D that you haven't thought about. Like don't take things from D&D just because they're there. Think about what they mean. When I was doing the stat line for Heroic Chord, my latest season 1 zine is available on our website.
Mm-hmm.
But sorry, I distracted myself with the promo. Right. My first thing was I don't believe there is such a thing as an intelligence stat. That's not a thing. And what I came up with was approaches. So the five stats in Heroic Chord are understanding, sensitivity, subtlety, daring, and adaptability. Basically, the stat line is how you approach a problem. And it's got nothing to do with an ironclad quantification of what you're capable of as a person. It's just do you approach problems by adapting to change, by trying to understand what's going on, or by sneaking? And some of my favorite games have alternative stat lines. Golden Sky Stories is beautiful. It has you are an adult, a child, an animal, and a henge, a magical shapeshifter. You're all four of these things to different degrees. And that's what makes you special, which I love. How about you? What are some of your favorites?
Ooh.
Lasers and Feelings.
Yeah, Lasers and Feelings is excellent because it's because it's so incredibly simple, and because it's so simple, it's so easily adaptable. And the base mechanic is so wonderful. So for anyone who doesn't know, Lasers and Feelings is a one-page role-playing game in which you have two statistics for your character, lasers and feelings. You decide sort of which you are, and actually it's not even two statistics, it's one statistic. You decide how big your number is. And then deciding how big the number is, so you choose a number between 2 and 5. And based on that, you are either predominantly lasers or you're predominantly feelings. And if you are basically, if you are better at one, I forget which is high and which is low, but if you were better at one, if you were better, let's say lasers is high. If you are better at lasers, then you have to roll under your number. And if you are better at feelings, you have to roll over your number because it's a low number on the die. And it's so easily, and they're both vague enough, like lasers can cover everything from firing actual lasers to anything tech related to anything that might be like mechanical, like driving or anything like that. And then feelings is like all the other stuff. Feelings might be interacting with other people. It might be like understanding some sort of like arcane text.
Might be hostility.
Yeah, exactly. And the great thing is that people have taken this. There's a wonderful show on the Saving Throw Network where they basically, it's like every episode is a different hack of lasers and feelings. Nice. So they'll use it to play everything from they'll use it to play all sorts of like different properties. The latest one, they just had a DuckTales hack of it. So, and that was a lot of fun. And that's what they do. And it's wonderful to see these, like a wide variety of games that get played and stories that get told. Using just the base mechanic of, high-low, roll under, roll over. And that's it. And you can name the stats whatever you want. There is actually a Twitter bot. I think it's just Lasers and Feelings bot, but somebody can search for it. And it just, every once in a while, it just comes up with a tweet of you know, you're either this or you're that. And then it gives a premise for a game that you can play with those stats. And it's just amusing. So
yeah. One thing that's really great about lasers and feelings that has led me to some bigger thoughts about stat lines. Come with me on this journey. Is that it's really easy to stat up your favorite Star Trek characters in lasers and feelings. Geordi LaForge is a 3. He's right there. He's a competent feelings boy. He's a confident lasers man. He's the best character. Sorry, everybody. The best character is Geordi LaForge. Spock is all lasers. Doc McCoy's all feelings.
Yep.
But I think the act of statting up a character, either from pop culture or maybe a person you know, but somebody that exists before you open the game book, is a really good exercise in determining whether this is a stat line that is reflected in a person that you can observe. Like what are Captain Kirk's D&D stats? I mean, you could argue that he has a high charisma and a low wisdom, but at the same time,
Does he?
Lasers and feelings. That's a feelings boy. That's a feelings boy who wants to sleep with all the green ladies.
Yeah. And that also shows up some of the danger of using games that don't necessarily fit what you're trying to do. But, I mean, yes, you could make the argument that perhaps James Kirk's wisdom stat should be lower, but should it really? Because he's not unwise. He's just
jackass.
Impetuous. Well, he's just impetuous. He's just he goes with his gut. He has those wonderful speeches that he gives all the time, and he sounds very wise. Assuming that he is sincere in what he's talking about, then then he seems to be like a reasonably good leader, and therefore pretty wise. It's just, sometimes he values his feelings over logic and reason. So.
Because he's got a little shoulder angel and a little shoulder devil. And the little shoulder devil is the best character in Star Trek. I know I said it was Geordi LaForge, but it is actually Doc Boy. But it is Geordi LaForge. But it's okay. So if you're gonna stat up Kirk, you need some kind of way to like purchase complications with impetuous action points. If you're gonna capture the way he moves through the world, forget intelligence, forget wisdom. You have these impetuous action points that you use to buy complications, and then you talk your way out of them.
Yeah.
By being William Shatner, our nation's crazy uncle.
We just got a message in chat, actually. Cat's echoing really badly.
Oh, spaghetti. I know. What?
Maybe just turn down your gain. Who can answer at the throne of God? Anyway.
Give me a second.
This is no time to start quoting William Blake.
This is not the time for that. Okay.
Thanks, Sirius Inc. We're fixing it.
Get bent, Nick. Okay. How's that?
And thanks for joining us.
Can you hear me, by the way? No. Okay, can OBS hear me? Yes, OBS can hear me. Oh, I know what to do. Okay, how's this?
It's good.
Okay. I just needed to tell OBS to forget what my mic is telling it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sound good to me.
Okay.
Serious
perfect.
Inc.
I can still hear
Serious
myself.
Inc. What do you? Good. What do you think out there? Let us know in the chat if that has solved the issue.
Yeah.
And in any case, we'll continue.
Okay. So, yeah, I think you really need to think about a property. If you're doing a property, the specific demands that story has of people. Like, I'm going to circle back to Golden Sky Stories because it's my favorite game. The story is not going to demand that you be strong or that you have a high constitution, that you be tough, I guess. It demands that you be an adult or a child or an animal. And anytime that strength comes up, it's part of being an animal, which is the demand of the story. So another piece of advice I guess I'd have for designers is to think about what these stories are about and what they demand of people.
Right.
We got sidetracked by lasers and feelings. What are some other good stat lines?
Other good stat lines. Well, we got onto Star Trek, and it's not necessarily a good stat line per se, but it got me thinking about. So, I'm an old man, and so I'm old enough to remember the first time that a Star Trek role-playing game came out. FASA put out a box set of Star Trek RPG. And it was a good game, but much in the same vein of all the games at that time. You roll up your characters. The only difference in your stats was that it was all percentile based, but you still had things like strength, dexterity, yada yada yada. And I think what the issue is that, and a lot of other Star like games with properties have done this as well. Star Trek in particular is that they try and make it so that you can adventure in that property's world, like so that you're a real person in like really in that world. The latest Star Trek role-playing game, Star Trek Adventures, says no one wants to be a janitor in the Star Trek universe. Like we're not trying to make it a virtual simulation. It's all about being a character in a Star Trek show. And so the rules system that they've set up is very much slanted towards that idea that you are, that you are a crew working together on a starship. But you are essentially characters in a Star Trek show.
That's the Motivus one, right?
Yeah.
Because I've been meaning to pick that up forever.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful game for that reason, because they stopped trying to make it all about making you a real person, and instead they focus on making you an authentic Star Trek character. So it's all about how you fit in with your crew, and how you work together to solve problems. And they still have some of the same sort of like statistic, issues that we're talking about. But for the most part, it's really focused sort of on your what type of character you are and how you approach problems, which I think is what you were talking about with with your game. Yeah. So yeah.
And that's that's a really good approach, because we call them characters, not people.
Mm-hmm.
So to start from the idea that these are characters in a drama is really fruitful, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to play, like if you want to play the deep down, like the emotional turmoil inside of like Kirk, like Captain Kirk, I would argue that none of the Star Trek role playing games are appropriate ways to do that. There are probably much better games to sit down and explore that with. There's a lot of indie games out now that are just really fantastic, like either one-person journaling games or like two-person back and forth games that would explore that that sort of stuff. But if you play James T. Kirk, generally speaking, you want to be Captain of the Enterprise. Like you want the opening credits, and you want like the camera to pan across the bridge and find you sitting in the chair, and you don't care that like Kirk was in his quarters 2 hours before, like agonizing over the crew roster or anything like that. It's like, no, you want to pick up where the episode picks up. So
yeah, maybe just like an everyone is John hack.
Yeah,
everyone is Jim.
Oh, that would be so much fun.
That would be extremely fun.
And then you could have, so when I ran games for Pathfinder, because I was a Pathfinder venture captain, one of their organized play people. At big conventions, we would have like multi-table, all the tables playing the same game together.
Right.
It would be really fun to have like a setup where you're playing. This table is playing Everyone is Jim. This table is playing Everyone is Bones. And this table over here is playing Everyone is Spock. And then you were trying to, and you do that for like all of the characters that you want to have present.
And the room is playing Star Trek.
And the room is playing Star Trek Adventures.
That's
that would
terrible,
be,
but amazing.
Oh, that would be so much fun. Oh no. I shouldn't have said anything because now I'm going to have to do that.
No, you're going to have to do that.
Oh.
I'm envisioning right now of a mutual friend of ours who, if this idea was communicated to them, would insist upon it.
You'd have to have
hardworking captains.
Yeah, you'd have to have like one person who is the avatar for the table, who sort of listens to what all of the other people at the table are saying, and then at some point gets up and says, okay, Kirk is doing this, like based on and there has to be like some trust that they're, instead of like striking out on their own, that they're going to actually follow along with the consensus of the table.
Like a shot caller.
Oh no!
Like an old basic D&D shot caller.
Oh no! This idea is too good.
We designed the worst game. It does sound like fun though. I'd play Everyone in Bones. Bones can be trusted.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you got to try it at least once.
Oh, that sounds amazing. It wouldn't be hard to find that many minutes.
Oh no, I'm sure we could definitely find like enough. And actually, it would be a great game to play online right now because there's nothing inherently, you don't need to be in the same room for it. You could set up separate. You could set up a Discord channel, and then set up separate channels inside that Discord server. And you have like Jim's channel and Bones's channel, and like they're just chatting in there. And then at some point, you have like the amalgamated channel.
I think you could also vary the number of players. Okay.
Yes.
One of the big things that I want to get across with this talk is that you need to think about how you're conceptualizing a person and the tools you're using to get that across. So, like, everyone is Jim has a lot of players. He's a chaotic creature. He has a lot of impulses. Maybe everyone is Bones has a couple. Like, Bones is a lot more even. He's less unpredictable. Maybe there's 2 people who are Bones. And there's several people who are Spock. Spock can be very conflicted, but there's a whole room of Jim. There's a whole... You can't control him. And that's a strange way of communicating the relative chaos level of Star Trek characters. But it's a tool at your disposal.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not a bad one. If you set up sort of the if you set up Bones, like Kirk, Bones, Spock as your... Arguably, I would say Bones and Spock are like the ends of the spectrum, and Kirk is somewhere in the middle there. Definitely slanted more towards Bones than Spock, but I mean, still not as... very easy to then fit every other character on that spectrum and decide, like, how many players are we going to assign, and what abilities will each of those players have. Like, I could see... Yes, Spock has a lot of internal conflict, but it never, it doesn't externally manifest as often.
Yeah. So maybe everyone is Spock is a little asymmetrical. There's several players, but there's one who maybe has more tokens to spend, and that's the stoic. Yeah.
Except for... Except if we do the Amok Time episode, in which case...
How dare you?
Suddenly all of the Stoics' tokens are just gone. Stoic doesn't get a vote.
No.
But yeah, no. Anyway,
sounds great.
It sounds great. I'm sure people didn't tune in for, to listen to us design an entirely new Star Trek game.
We got sidetracked.
Although they should have, damn it.
We should have. And I'm going to stand by 2 important takeaways. One of them is that you need to use all the tools at your disposal. You can't just use the ones you inherited from D&D. We talked about that. The other one is Lasers and Feelings is a good game. That's a good takeaway.
Yes. Yeah, that is an excellent takeaway.
Right, I remember now. The other takeaway is that you need to think of the kind of characters you're portraying. You need to think about what traits matter to the story and how you can quantify or not those traits.
Yeah. And a good example of that, I think, at like a basic level, is the difference between Call of Cthulhu Rules as Written and Trail of Cthulhu, which is a version by Robin D. Laws. Or no, sorry, not Robin, Kenneth Haidt. I conflate them because it's one of the few 2 white guys talking about stuff that I still listen to, the Ken and Robin Talk About Stuff podcast. So in my head, they are basically just 2 voices from the same body.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure how thrilled they will be to ever hear that, but that's just how I think about it. Anyway, so it used to be like Call of Cthulhu is very much it's a percentile. You are rolling under your ability score. So if you have 75% in anthropology and you need to check something to do with anthropology, you roll percentile dice and you're trying to get under that. And then to varying degrees, how much you get under that can also affect, like, is it an exceptional success, blah, blah, blah. However, if you fail, you fail. Like rules as written, there is nothing in the rule set to say that the game master or the storyteller has to like allow you to fail forward or like do anything else. Just rules as written. And probably the best example of that is like researching. Like one of the skills is library use. Speaking of things that are in the game because it's important to the game, there's a lot of researching like stuff out of dusty old tomes, and so there is an ability score in the game for library use. But if you fail at it, you get nothing. And in a game that depends on having that information, often to like properly move forward and do something in the story, that can stop the game dead. And then you have to find, like, the party has to mess around finding like another way around the problem. Or so in Trail of Cthulhu, instead what they do is they say, look, if you are so skilled at anthropology that anthropology is one of the skills that your character has, then you just succeed at anthropology checks. If it has to do with anthropology, you succeed. You find the clue, you find like whatever the information is. But we're going to give you the ability to then spend points to put that information in a greater context if it's there. And the game master will decide, like, will essentially lead the player. It's like, okay, yeah, you find like the scrap of, you think it's some sort of like animal hide, but you're not quite sure. Do you want to spend some points for more information? And then depending on how many points the player wants to like actually spend on that, determines sort of like how much more context they get. So everything always moves forward. You will always, you are always good at the things you were good at, right? You don't have a situation where your world-renowned anthropologist like rocks up to a crime scene and and like looks it over and like comes up a goose egg. Yeah, like your anthropologist or your crime scene analyst or your detective or your whatever you're good at, whatever the focus of your character is, you will always be good at that thing. It's just, are you also good at it? Are you also good at it enough that you can put it in the context of like elder gods and that sort of, and like the Cthulian mythology? And because that's sort of the crux of the game. You're not just running around like solving mysteries and stuff like that, although that would be fun. You're solving mysteries in the context of like eldritch horror. And so are you able to contextualize that? And that's sort of what the game allows you to do by spending points to be able to do that. So
yeah, I think having stats and skills revolving around any kind of information economy is gonna absolutely kill your game, because the GM relies on conveying information to the players.
Yes.
So anytime you're a GM and you're like, roll me a nature roll, you don't know anything.
Yeah. Oops.
What a pickle we've got ourselves into. It's having an intelligence stat or skills for knowing things puts that failure chance on something the GM needs. It's not good.
And it's an interesting discussion because it's, these discussions pop up on Twitter in a seemingly rotating cycle. But one of the ones that came up was somebody was saying it's like so wonderful that Dungeons and Dragons like allows us like the opportunity to fail forward and things like that. And it's like, no, D&D doesn't allow you to do that at all.
No.
We choose to do that. We do it in spite of Dungeons and Dragons. Like we do it because D&D is broken. And if we didn't allow characters,
feel the game grind to a halt.
Yeah, for exactly the reason you say. When the druid like says, "I want to do a nature check," the druid should be able to do a nature check, unless it is something so far, unless the point of like whatever the information is or the session is that they don't fully understand it and that they are trying to discover it, and that you're doling out that information like very miserly. Then maybe they can fail a little bit, but you still have to give them something. If you just tell them like, yep, you don't know.
Even then, though, let's say the druid always succeeds at nature checks. The druid understands nature. When the GM says, you don't know what this is, that conveys information. that's
absolutely.
That conveys a lot of information. Doesn't need a dice roll.
Yeah.
Never need a dice roll for that.
Yeah, exactly. And if Dungeons and Dragons was actually set up that way, that would be great, right? Like if you established, using that as the example, if you establish that in game, if it has anything at all to do with nature, the druid will always know the answer to it. Just guaranteed. As the game master, if you are playing the druid and you ask me a question about like plants, birds, ecology, like global warming, like whatever, you will always know the answer. I will always give it to you. So if you ask me a question from a nature perspective and I say, no, you don't know, like that should be the thing that then triggers like, oh, this isn't nature at all. And now I've got to wake the wizard up and see like maybe the wizard has a perspective on this that he or she will actually understand what's going on.
Yeah. That conveys information.
Yeah. But it doesn't work that way. And I mean, theoretically, it could work that way in Dungeons and Dragons, but because our players have been trained that either you succeed or you don't. You either roll the right number or you roll the wrong number. It can be hard to train them out of that.
Yeah.
I know I've had through anytime I've taken anybody that I've played Dungeons and Dragons with or who has played primarily Dungeons and Dragons, and I take them into a game where it's not as hard and fast. You don't necessarily succeed or fail. There is a spectrum of success as opposed to like a hard stop. They have like eventually they come around to it and they really love it, but there is like a learning curve at the very beginning. It's like, so I fail. Well, no. Like here's some more information for you, and it's like, oh, but I didn't understand the thing. It's like, yeah, but I mean, there's stuff you do understand.
Can I say how bananas it is that we treat D&D as a learner system?
Oh God,
that's bananas. It's not a good game to learn on.
No, and I mean, it's part of its current popularity is that because actual plays have become so popular, that behavior is modeled very successfully by a number of people. Right, Critical Role is one of the obvious ones and the biggest one, but there are any number of live streams out there that run D&D games, and so it's very easy to watch it and see how it should go, and have that behavior modeled, and so you can go, oh, okay. But then conversely, it's also very easy for people to be watching that and go, oh, this is how like all games work. And I think that adds, it's a bit of a learning curve getting into not just playing other games, but also watching other games on actual plays, because the play experience is different. The timing of the game is different. Watching D&D is almost like watching sports, because you have things broken down into like discrete chunks of time, right? You're doing your social stuff now. And then it's like the whistle blows and we roll for initiative, and now the fighting has started, and the fighting is broken up into like discrete chunks of time, and it's very, very easy to watch and digest that way. It is arguably less easy to watch and digest like a more pure story-driven game where it may not be broken up, as easily. It may not be easy to figure out where you are in what's going on, like how close the party is to their goals and things like that. In D&D, because it's like, okay, well, we defeated this room full of monsters. We're almost finished defeating this room full of monsters, and we have 2 rooms left to go through. In a game like Ryutama, where it's also a fantasy game, but more set in like more of a storytelling based game, and more set in like you don't necessarily have to fight everything, and it's more like it's basically like playing fantasy, but in like a Studio Ghibli.
I finally ordered the hard copy.
Nice.
It's on its way to me.
Yeah, nice. If I dropped you into the middle of watching a game of that, you might be lost for like a good little while until you figured out exactly what was going on, because there's none of those sort of external signals as to progress or success that you find in Dungeons and Dragons.
On
one of my. I was just going to say, I just wish D&D was a better game.
Yeah, don't we all? Don't we all wish D&D was better? I'm going to be running Golden Sky Stories on the stream that I do Sunday nights. Okay, I promise I'm done doing that.
No.
I'm gonna okay, great. I'm gonna take over for our usual GM for a night or two and run Golden Sky Stories. And admittedly, I'm a little anxious about that because I'm not sure how Golden Sky Stories is gonna translate to an actual play medium. Should probably try and track down some podcasts or streams. But I just love it so much. It's so perfect. Mm-hmm. So pure.
Yeah.
It's why it's my favorite game.
And I mean, it's not. Oh yeah, and it's not that you can't play like story games on a live stream. I sort of like, because I was talking about this with somebody else the other day. I liken it to the difference between being able to watch Star Trek and being able to watch Babylon 5.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Star Trek. If I sit down on the couch and there's an episode of Star Trek on, I can generally just sit down and start watching it. And if I've started reasonably close to the beginning of that episode, even if I haven't, I can generally pick up what's going on, and I don't really need to know what happened in the episode beforehand, and I don't really care what happens in the episode after, because each episode wraps itself up very nicely. If I do the same thing with like an episode of like Babylon 5, I may still enjoy the episode, but there's probably easily like half of it that I'm not going to understand what exactly was going on. And it's not going to have told me anything about what happened before necessarily. And it may only tangentially help me understand what's coming up like next. So, so I liken that that's very much like D&D is Star Trek, and like all the other story games or any of that other stuff is Babylon 5, and it's just, again, not bad, just different.
Yeah,
but
different and harder to follow. Okay, I'm trying to think about stat lines. I'm trying to think about games. Let's say let's hypothetically build a stat line. Let's do that.
Okay. Sure.
Step 1, what kind of stories do we want to tell with this hypothetical game?
let's tell stories. Let's do a Psych role-playing. I don't know if you're familiar with the television show Psych.
I am, yeah. Okay. All right.
Excellent. Let's do a Psych role-playing game.
Okay. So the key things that Psych expresses are smugness.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely got to be an observation mechanic.
Yes.
It depends on how newfangled we're going, because a very modern game would have points that a player could spend to say, I already knew this was going to happen, which would very much mimic how an episode of Psych goes. Whereas a more old-fashioned game would have you rolling to make observations.
Let's go newfangled, because I like the mechanic. I'm already thinking of, because we've mentioned observation and we've mentioned smugness. So I think observation is what you spend your points on, and your smugness in relation to how much you are correct is what gets you points back.
Here's my thought. I like that, by the way. I like regaining points with smugness. That's very Psych. That's very powerful. Let's divide it by subjects. Sure. I think all of our characters are going to be keen observers. You want to be the main character. You want to be the one making the observations. What if we had different levels of ability in different subjects? So someone could have a certain number of points in observing human behavior.
Yeah.
And you spend these points to make human observations. You spend these points to make probability calculations. You spend these points to make what's another thing that you can observe that's meaningful to this kind of story?
Like something to do with forensics, so like physical.
Yeah.
Like physical evidence. I'm not sure how you would one word that.
I mean, forensics.
Other than just say forensics.
Forensics, probability, behavior.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having one for media.
Yes, because that is a big part of the Psych show is the pop culture.
Yeah.
Aspect of it.
From the background of somebody who's studied investigations, things like social media posts, public statements, these are important to observe. And I think they might be different enough from just a general human behavior that we can get away with 2 stats.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. I'd agree with that.
So, have you ever read Mortal Coil?
No.
It's an old story game from, probably around the turn of the century. God, I love saying turn of the century. I'm bad. But all of your stats were different, stacks of chips, basically.
Okay.
So we can have a pools, is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have pools.
I like it.
So the way play goes then is you make an observation by spending a point. The GM will tell you what you observe, what it means, and you reveal it smugly.
Yes.
Okay. No, I like that.
Yeah, and I think it starts with the GM. The GM gives everybody a base bit of information. So it's like reading out the description to the room when right? When the adventuring party walks into the dungeon room, the GM gives them a certain baseline of information, and then they have to dig from there.
Yeah.
So then they will start spending points on like their various areas of expertise, and whether or not they can get more information, whether or not there is more information to get. Maybe they spend points, and you don't want to do that too much.
Yeah,
but they're
not good GMing.
But there should be some possibility of like coming up dry, or at least coming up with like something that's maybe different than what you expected.
Because there's always a moment in Psych where he observes something that is not relevant to the story, and he's still smug about knowing it.
Yes.
So I think the dead-end observations will still feed into this being Psych.
Yeah. Oh, and then what you can have is that instead of your smugness, like using your smugness to buy back those points or buy points back after you spend them, how successfully smug you are can determine whether or not you had to spend those points. So maybe it's worth it to put in like an extra 3 or 4, instead of spending 1 or 2 points, maybe it's worth it to spend like 3, 4, 5 points so that you can get as much information as possible and be really extra smug. And then if you're successfully smug, like smug enough that you've confounded everybody else, you didn't have to spend those points to begin with, or you didn't have to spend as many.
I think what you're proposing is an anti-game, like a bidding game, and I'm here for that.
Yeah.
I like that mechanic a lot.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to bid 6. I'm going to observe the bartender. I'm going to look at the drinks. I'm going to watch the guy in the corner. 3 more things. It's all this stuff.
Yep.
Yep. I like the idea of a bidding game because it's not it's competitive. It's competitive crime solving is kind of the crux of Psych.
It really is.
That's what makes it so fun.
Yeah. And then there has to be something in there that is well, I guess it wouldn't be for everybody, because the only person in there who's really trying to deceive anyone is Sean.
Sean, that's his name.
Because he's trying to convince. Yeah, because he's trying to convince everybody that he's a psychic, when he's actually just a brilliant detective. Like that wouldn't be enough. But yeah, I thought there should be some sort of like deception mechanic in there, but really, I mean, that could be tied into his smugness. Is that it's not enough for him to be smug. He also has to convince people that he got that information, like not. Maybe it's every piece of information
has a different reveal.
Yeah, and he gets his points back. He replenishes his points pool for every piece of information that he can reveal that someone couldn't have, like that someone else didn't get simply by observing the situation.
Yeah. Whereas, like, maybe you've got a character who's less Sean and more Sherlock, and it's like you gain points by being a smug jackass.
Yeah, by doing exactly the opposite, by pointing out everything that, well, everybody else saw this, but you obviously didn't understand what it meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a character who's trying to hide how good they are at this, and they regain points by stating it in a way that makes other people feel like they came to the conclusion. Somebody who's got kind of like a very self-effacing approach. Okay, that would be a very fun game we've made, Fred. We made a fun game.
That would be a lot of fun. And the wonderful thing about it is that like none of the stuff that D&D values is important in the game.
No, like, my character's huge.
Yeah.
My character's jacked. Get bench press 5 orphans.
Yeah. And that's great. That may come up in like, part of the story or something like that, but it won't be something that we roll a check for or that we spend any time on. It's just like, yeah, you're jacked. So it's like, I'm going to go over and I'm going to like kick this door open. Yeah, absolutely. You're jacked. You go over and you boot that door open.
Maybe have a trait that's just like jacked. Can boot open. Nice. Yeah. Can talk to cops without getting in trouble. It's a rare trait.
Oh, it's a trait sorely needed these days.
Can interact with human beings.
Yes.
Everybody needs a Gus in the party.
Yes.
It's like the best way to design stats for any game is to think about what matters to that story.
Yes. Yeah.
And
conversely, if you look at, again, if you look at Dungeons and Dragons and you look at the fact that strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma are stats and that they're important to the story, that tells you something about the types of stories that you can tell with Dungeons and Dragons. And more than that, it tells you something about the types of stories you pretty much have to tell with Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like if you're going to have a strength stat, then your story in there has to include combat, or at the very least, it has to include the opportunity for your character to be better at strength than somebody else, or else what's the point?
Right.
You've got to be smarter, you've got to be faster, you've got to be wiser, although that rarely comes up.
You got to be bad, you got to be bold, you got to be...
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, when I hear people say that like, oh, I want to do like this setting, like this thing. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it work in Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm like, why?
Don't.
Dungeons and Dragons doesn't want you.
Does not want that.
It has its stories. It has the way that those stories can be told. If what you're trying to do fits with that, great. You can play a Dungeons and Dragons game in that setting or with those types of characters or situations. But if it doesn't, you're spending a lot of time to homebrew something to fit D&D when you could actually just take that same time and homebrew something that is completely separate from D&D.
Find a more similar game.
Yeah. Or find a system that actually is designed to allow you to port in other systems and work around them, like lasers and feelings. Or if you want something a little crunchier, something like the Cypher system from Monte Cook Games, which is a great base because you can use that base mechanic and you can tweak your ability scores and sort of make them fit exactly what you want. So if you have, the example I have is when they were still showing stuff on Geek and Sundry, they had like their Cypher 6. I think Cypher 6 was like their sort of proto superhero game that they ran using Cypher system, and it was, they tweaked the stuff to make super heroic abilities fit, as opposed to just you know, like more sci-fi type of stuff. So
Like,
yeah, I mean, you just
the thought of somebody trying to do a superhero D&D hack is heartbreaking to me.
yeah.
Because of all the genres, there's a million really good superhero games. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Well, and
you can play.
it's interesting because back in like the Marvel superheroes game, which was done by TSR back in the 80s, and which I think is still, like, arguably, I think it's still one of the best um, superhero games out there. But one of the reasons it works so well is that it's such a departure um, from what TSR was doing with all their other games. They didn't really have like a house system. They would make up an entirely new rule system for every game they were putting out, which is, I mean, we can file that away under the very many reasons why TSR eventually crashed and burned. Because hey, guess what? It's really difficult and costly to sustain 8 to a dozen different rule systems. But anyway, I digress. But their whole thing was that, like, and I mean, they still had like ability scores, like, your strength, your constitution, and stuff like that. But their thing was is that you didn't necessarily, I mean, there were numbers involved, but you had incredible strength, as opposed to like a strength of 16. You had, and then what they had was a chart. So if you wanted to do something, you would basically take you have incredible strength, and you're trying to do this thing here, which has a difficulty of, let's say, remarkable. And so we'll go to this chart and we'll go like incredible strength, remarkable, and boop, and this is the result. And it was a really elegant system for, like, very quick and easy to use and very elegant for storytelling. But it was very focused on telling the specific type of stories you wanted to tell with like Marvel superheroes. You were very much telling a comic book story. If you then tried to go, what if we took Marvel superheroes but hacked it to be like Days of Our Lives? It's like, no. That's not going to work.
That exists. It's called Smallville.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's DC,
yeah,
but
yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's another. I'm blanking on what they called it, but it was the Margaret Weiss Cortex. The base rule set she had was Cortex, and then like Smallville role playing game, the Supernatural role playing game, Serenity, and Firefly, because they did a role playing game for both the movie and the television show. All sort of like build off of the Cortex system, because it's designed to be like just a basic mechanic system, and then you build up from there.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, if you're talking superhero games, Fate is kind of explicitly designed. I mean, it's designed to be a universal, but it's designed to be a superhero game.
Yeah.
Like Fate is full of examples of how to play it superheroes. It's not hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it is definitely, like, Fate is definitely a game that is slanted towards playing like high octane. Again, you will, if you're good at something, like if you've put it on your character sheet, you will generally succeed at it. Like there's no,
yeah.
If you've decided that it is important enough to be on your character sheet, then it is something that you are always going to be good at. It's just a question of, sort of context and whether or not how that interacts with the other people. So, yeah, no, I really like the fate system that way.
Yeah. I think the moral of the story is a refrain that's been circling on TTRPG Twitter lately, which is play another game.
Yeah. That was sort of my, like, even before the latest stuff with Mike Mearls popped up, that was one of the reasons why I did 30 days of like read indie RPGs hashtag and read a video every day, is because, you know, there's so many people were saying, like, when you just come out and say, like, oh, just play something else. Usually, if you have people who are new to the hobby and have been playing D&D for anywhere from 2 days up to like even a year and a half, they may not be aware of how else there is. And they may also, like, having having spent the time to like read the D&D rule books and learn like D&D system, they might be frightened and like they might be mistakenly thinking that, well, that's the learning curve for all games.
It isn't.
And so part of what, amongst the many things that I was trying to do when I was reading like snippets from role-playing games every day in April, was I wanted to highlight indie role-playing games. I specifically wanted to highlight indie role-playing games by otherwise marginalized creators.
Yep.
And I did that out of all 30. Out of all 30 of my games that I talked about, I think you will find 2 straight white males. And they're only in there because I legitimately loved the games. And it would be a shame not to talk about them. But like every other game that I talked about comes from a marginalized creator, because they're doing some amazing work. Holy crap.
Sorry.
But I also wanted to show off games that were like a lot of the games that yes, there were a few games that I highlighted, like Flying Circus or Ryutama, which are like longer, like book-long games. They have a rule book and a fairly hefty PDF that you need to read through. But most of the games that I talked in there are, some of them were 1 page. Some of them were technically 3 pages, but when one of those pages is the cover sheet, and then the final page is like the credits of who did what and stuff like that. It really is a 1-page RPG. Yeah. But most of them weren't any more than like maybe, they were all somewhere between like 1 and a dozen pages long. So the learning curve is really, really easy for all of them. And they're all really good games.
Yeah.
And especially with our current situation. Right? What was that? Sorry?
You did iHunt, right? As part of that?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, Legend. Yeah. iHunt was the first one. iHunt was what I led with. Yeah. Such a fantastic game. I got a chance to interview Olivia Hunt, which was exciting. Nice. Once I've ironed out the tech on these live streams, I may have to get her on and do another interview, because she's doing some more wonderful stuff with iHunt that I'm really excited about. And she has a new game centered around vampires coming out that sounds very exciting. Anyway. So yeah, I mean, there's so much else out there for people to play besides Dungeons and Dragons. And then, of course, all the most recent stuff with around Mike Mearls and yeah. So they really need to fire that guy. Yeah.
Fire that man.
Yeah.
Wizards.
Fire Mike Mearls.
Fire Mike Mearls. He sucks.
As a first step. I think that's important to mention too, is that firing Mike Mearls is like a first step. because there is a larger corporate culture issue at work. There has to be for Mike Merles to have kept his job.
Yeah.
For this entire time. So, as a first step, you have to show willing and fire Mike Merles, and then we need to see everything clean up. We need to see the people above him who protected him get shuffled along as well. We need to see like things change, so that nobody at the company needs to be afraid that, you know, if they whistleblow or if they talk about being harassed or witness harassments or any of that sort of stuff, that it's gonna blow back on them. These are attainable things. I work in an office where this is a thing, so I know it's attainable.
Yeah. I was just going to say, we're both civil servants, so we understand how possible it is to have a civil workplace.
Yeah. And that is, you know, it is by no means a guarantee that things run smoothly all the time and that there aren't any problems. It's just that if there is a problem, everyone knows how to deal with it, and everyone has the right expectations for how it should and will be dealt with. And right now, that is sorely lacking, at least from like any observable evidence. That is sorely lacking at Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. And frankly, the community around Dungeons and Dragons needs to see it. They need to know that this isn't acceptable. I mean, even if you go back to 2015 and you know, the sort of the inciting incident around Mike Merles with the him, like what he actually did that should have got him fired. All of that stuff around Zach Smith and that sort of thing. You know, the amount of time it took them to actually like remove Zach Smith, this is a bad time to blank on his name. Totally blanking on his name, but Grimasaur?
Yeah.
I want to say, anyway, like some of the other people who consulted on that, one of which was a Canadian. And I mean, I know it doesn't mean anything to be a Canadian. Canadian doesn't make you like a superhero or anything like that. I just, as a Canadian, I feel bad every time like one of these abusers or harassers turns out to be Canadian. And I'm just like, oh man, why are you? But he's a Canadian who has now run off to South America and thinks he's some sort of guru.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, yeah.
Exciting life choice.
But he's apparently some sort of like lifestyle guru who still tries to harass people about tabletop role-playing games. I don't know.
That's a good lifestyle.
Obviously his life took a swerve at some point and he really needs to get back on track. But yeah, I honestly don't care if he gets back on track because he's not important to me. It's all the people who have been hurt that are important to me. Like, you know, I look at the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons, and great. Dungeons and Dragons is a very popular game. Everyone is having a great time playing it. You know, in spite of people like Mike Merles, in spite of people like Zach Smith, and everyone else. And I just think of all of the, you know, the argument that I keep hearing over and over again is that, but look at the amazing stuff they've created. Like, look at the contributions they've made to the hobby. How could we possibly have a hobby without them? And I'm like, well, then I have to look at like all of the people that they have harassed and made not want to be in the hobby anymore. All of those people who might have given us something, you know, really amazing and made amazing contributions of their own that aren't in the hobby anymore, or who express on a regular like express regularly that they maybe don't want to be in the hobby anymore, that the hobby is really hostile to them, because of all of the stuff that happened around Mike Mearls and Zach Smith. And it just breaks my heart. Like I'm, and it's not stuff that I will ever have to deal with. Like, I mean, look at me. I'm a 50-year-old white guy. The hobby was made for me. Like, it caters to me at every turn. And it really shouldn't. Because I'm nothing special. So
I'm excited to turn 50. Maybe then D&D will take me seriously.
Yeah. Oh. And I have to be careful with that, because there are people in the hobby, like gatekeepers in the hobby, who weaponize how long they've been playing. Right? So you get the people who are like, oh, well, I've been playing since 1979, and let me tell you about. And it's like, no. I have been playing for 40 years, and what I can tell you about Dungeons and Dragons is, it takes me a hot second to figure out if the rule I'm remembering is from the edition I'm actually playing. Like, 40 years in the hobby is actually made it more difficult for me to play D&D. So, sorry. Like, understand how you think that you like an expert on how it should be played, and because most of it's anything else. So,
yeah. And playing D&D for a billion years is what I'm hearing. A million years.
yeah.
It's one game. No, sorry, I've got a sneeze coming on. I'm trying to stop it. It's one game. You could say it's 6 games at most.
Yeah.
6 games, some more different than others. And that's, maybe that's a lot of depth of experience, but breadth of experience is valuable too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's
sort of more like, when I look back over the amount of time I've been in the hobby, yeah, certainly Dungeons and Dragons was like the main game that I played, but I was lucky enough that that I was interested in other things. Granted, growing up in Fort McMurray, which for anyone who doesn't know is like an isolated northern community in Canada, my window into the game was very much, or my window into the hobby, was very much whatever articles and ads I saw in Dragon Magazine, because I got into the game through my public library, because one of the librarians there was very much like, had discovered Dungeons and Dragons and was excited to set up a club and start playing it. Which also meant that they put Dragon Magazine as one of the periodicals that the library got in all the time.
Nice.
So yeah, I was lucky enough to like have access to the Dragon Magazine. If I didn't have that, I would have grown up, and basically until I left Fort McMurray, because let's remember, this was all pre-internet, kids. Until I left Fort McMurray and sort of got out into the broader world, Dungeons and Dragons, as far as I'm concerned, would have been the only game that existed. But I was able to like see ads and articles for like other stuff, like Chill, like Call of Cthulhu, like Sky Realms of Jorun, and just these others, and of course like the usual TSR stuff, like the Gamma World and Metamorphosis Alpha and Star Frontiers and all that other stuff. So, being able to know that there are different types of games available, and then, yeah, I mean, nowadays with PDFs being so easy to make, and like, a number of platforms like DriveThru RPG and Itch, where creators can actually just post up their stuff and get it out to the public and sell it like really easily. There is just so like I would defy someone like we talked about making a psych role-playing game. I would be surprised that if I didn't go digging on Itch or DriveThru RPG, that I didn't find something that already existed that would let us play Psych, the role-playing game.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there isn't, because like one of the games that I covered was again, I'm blanking on the name. It's horrible, but you can go back through my videos. It is essentially a Gallivant role-playing game. You're each playing characters from the television musical Gallivant, and it is all about when can you appropriately and inappropriately break into song. How long can you maintain that? It is hilarious and fun and lovely, and it is like less than 10 pages. And it is well worth, I think, $5 I paid for it. Like that is $5 for an evening entertainment for like, between 5 and 8 of your hammiest friends is like invaluable. So,
yeah. And if your friends only want to play D&D, bully them. Normally bullying is bad. Whatever, sure. Yes. Bullying is bad. Bully your friends.
Or just start transitioning them away. I mentioned on my blog when I talked about the whole Mike Merle situation that I was going to step away from playing Dungeons & Dragons, which turned out to be, on the one hand, functionally very easy to do. My one D&D group, when I came to them, and again, it's interesting because none of the players in my Tuesday night group are really hooked into the broader role-playing community. Like they're not on Twitter following role-play Twitter or anything like that. So they were unaware of any of the stuff going on around Mike Merles and Zach Smith and stuff like that. However, once I explained to them what was going on, they were all like, "Yep, F that guy," and they were like, "We don't know how to play D&D anymore. What are we going to play?" And it's like, well, the world we're playing in is homebrewed. It's my world, so we don't have to worry about that. It's not Forgotten Realms or anything like that. So there's nothing we have to change there. And they still wanted to play fantasy. So we switched over to something called the Black Hack, specifically the Black Hack 2nd Edition. And it's an OSR sort of updated version of basic D&D, essentially, with some very modern storytelling tweaks and stuff in it. Sadly, it does still use the same stat system that D&D has always had, but at least those statistics are actually being used. It is, for the most part, gone back over to a roll under system, so that you roll a d20 and you roll under your ability score in order to successfully do something. But it has like wonderful things like leveling up in the game is a process of you need to accumulate as many experiences as your current level. And by that, they mean you like actual experiences for your character, which you then have to relate to. You have to go back to like a pub or a tavern, and you have to, or like around a campfire or something like that, and you have to relate those experiences to the rest of your party. You have to tell them about how you felt about them, how they affected you, all the rest of it. And you have to do one of those experiences for each, for whatever your current level is. So leveling from 1 to 2, you're going to tell one experience. And once you do that, you roll a 6-sided die to show how much gold you've spent carousing. And you are hopefully able to afford it. Otherwise, you end up going into debt, and that's a whole separate thing that they have. And then you go up a level. But now you're level. So when you want to go up to level 3, when you've amassed enough experience as a level 2 character, you then have to sit down with your party around a table and pour them drinks, and tell them like stories, like at least 2 stories about your experiences. And you do this going up, and it turns into this, like, you could literally, I'm sort of looking forward, because currently I'm basically just porting everybody over. Currently they are all 5th level. So as soon as they are ready to level up, each of them is going to have to like tell 5 stories to the rest of the party about like their adventuring experiences or stuff that they did before they met, or like all of this other stuff. It's going to be like a beautiful in-character sharing session. And with 4 players, that's pretty much going to be our evening. Like, we're going to have a leveling up session. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it. But otherwise, the gameplay is extremely simple, extremely theater of the mind. And it allows us all to keep playing the same characters we've been playing without any real changes. So
good. Actually, I was just about to say, for people who prefer crunchier adventure games, you can always check out the OSR scene. We've been talking a lot about story games, but the OSR scene is kind of dedicated to preserving the crunch and the feel of classic D&D. So that might be more up a player's alley. The other thing is that what you described reminds me of my game. Me? It's time to talk about Cat. It's Cat time. But because we end every session with memory time, where everybody goes around the table and the players relate what was memorable to them or to their character. And they get a bonus die next session.
Ooh.
I like mechanics where people talk about what they liked. Yeah. We have rolled right on past 7 o'clock, my man.
Yes, we have. A little over an hour and a half.
Do any of our cool friends have any questions for us? Hey, cool friends.
That is, yeah. Is there anybody in chat who has a question? Is there anybody in chat?
I know Nick was there.
Maybe he couldn't stand the echoing and ran for the hills.
Get on a plane and beat him up. I'll do it.
That's fair.
Yeah. I won't get on a plane. Air travel is risky right now, and I won't want to contribute to that. I'll do violence later.
Alex just said, no questions. Thanks for the show.
Yay. Yay.
Well, you're very welcome, Alex. So yeah, I guess that's it for this for now.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do it again sometime.
I would love that. I've had a blast. We designed 2 very good games.
Yes.
Well,
yeah, I'm gonna have to put some serious thought into that working title. Everyone is Star Trek.
Yeah.
Oh, Alex, sorry, we do have a question.
Yeah.
Alex, Serious Inc. Alex asked, did you get a chance to discuss stat generation?
We did not.
And Serious Inc. is assuring us that they are still here. They're at work, though.
There's no need.
So
there's no need for violence this time. We didn't talk about
don't come down
generation.
Here. Yeah. As in, Alex clarifies, as in point buy versus random versus Shadowrun 5 madness.
I mean, I'm a big point buy fan. I like point buy.
Yeah. Same. I'm a big fan of point buy, and I'm a big fan of the fate, like picking keywords that are important to your character, and that will inform your character's play later on. Because I think a game that combines both of them is a really good game, because it allows people who, and I mean, left brain, right brain is like largely debunked, but I that terminology is just shorthand for me. The point buy makes it very, very easy for people who are predominantly like left brained and quantify things to figure out what's important to their character. And the keyword, a keyword system allows the people who are more right brained to do the same thing. And if you have a system that uses both, generally speaking, everyone can understand how to use like both things, but really glom on to one or the other, which I think is great and useful. Yeah. So like Fate is an excellent example of that, because Fate is all about like generating the special keywords or key phrases that are going to make your character stand out from everybody else. So there might be 10 Fate characters who all use a sword, but there's only one of you, which is the greatest swordsman in all of London.
Right. I should hate random generation because I am a modern story gamer, but I don't hate it. If you don't know who your character is, it can be a lot of fun to discover them through roles. I think you have to tune those roles very carefully so that players aren't strictly better than one another, but it can be fun to roll and be like, oh, guess I'm mostly lasers. Like,
yeah.
That's
I agree.
Well, I made a character generation table for my current game, and I'm seriously considering adding an optional rule to roll stats as well. It could be fun to discover someone before you play them.
Yeah.
My problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Stats are usually in the like 2 to 4 range, and that's not comfortably rollable.
You
could average some D4s, but
yeah, even though Powered by the Apocalypse doesn't use statistics that way, I do like the fact that their resolution system is like a 2d6. I feel like that is a good, comfortable curve of random number generation that, you're going to slant towards being moderately successful, like on average, with, enough of a variation in there of being either abject failures or super successful, that, that it makes things interesting. And then, of course, you have your ability to add your bonuses and stuff like that to affect those rolls. And in most games, you have a chance to choose to just go, no, I succeed, but at a cost.
Yeah, learn your dice. When you're making a game, learn your dice.
Yeah.
Because that can make all the difference. The D20 is not the best. It's so swingy.
Yeah. Well, because there's no real curve in it.
Yeah.
Every time you roll a D20, you are going to generate a number, and it could be any of those 20 faces. You have a 5% chance every time you roll the die of generating that number. So there's no curve. There's no, which is always makes it fun for me when I see people who do random charts who make it roll a d20 and pick something off the list, and it's you can tell that they've gone into a great deal of trouble to sort of slant the rarer or more amazing stuff towards the top or bottom. Right, so they've made the 1 is this extra special thing, and then the 20 is also this extra special thing, and then they've done it, and it's none of that matters because I have just as much chance of rolling a 17 as I do a 1. So,
Yeah.
But if you had a list with 10 things on it, and I rolled, or make sure I got the math right, 10 things, 11 things on it, and I rolled a 2d6 to see which one I got, then that would actually mean something.
Yeah. I have a friend who was working on a game whose random mechanic was you'd put tokens in a bag, so the probability was always fluctuating as things came in and out of the pool, and it was a ton of fun to play.
Nice.
This is somebody who thinks about probability a lot, so it was a blast. We need to play that again.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of games that allow you to use other things besides just dice. I'm thinking of Deadlands. The original Deadlands by Pinnacle Games was fantastic because it used playing cards, and it used them
hands, right?
Super thematically. That was how you figured out pretty much everything. That was your character generation. You dealt yourself a bunch of cards and built your character out of them. That is an entirely different topic for an entirely different show. But yeah, I really do love games that allow you to use something other than dice. I think part of that was because for the first year, I want to say that I played D&D back when I was 10. We didn't actually have dice because they weren't as common. They weren't included with the sets like they are now. Every time you get a basic set of something. And so what we got, and then there was a period where it was difficult to get them because the demand spiked. And they were originally, those different polyhedral dice were educational tools. And so people weren't, the companies that made them weren't ready for the demand. So there was a period where you couldn't get them easily. And so they started putting stiffened cardboard numbered chits into the thing. And so you would cut out, you'd have a little thing of chits numbered 1 through 20, and you'd cut each of them out, and then you dump them into we used film canisters, the little black, and then you'd put them all in the foam canister and you'd shake it, and then you'd reach in and you'd pull out a chit, and that was the number you rolled.
Wait, is that why you're such a dice goblin now?
Yeah, I'm hoarding against the possibility that there might be another dice shortage at some point in the future. I'm hoarding against the apocalyptic future in which dice become our currency.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I think, long story short, stat generation, just like stat array, it's got to fit the game. Random generation can be a lot of fun, but you need to tune your dice.
Yeah, absolutely.
3d6 down the line is not okay.
Yeah.
That's my hill.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I think that's answered everyone's questions.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me, Kat.
This has been a blast. Yeah. We're on your channel, so I think you're having me, but...
Well, yes, but this is eventually going to end up on your podcast, so.
This is true. Meow Meow has to learn how to edit audio.
Strip audio, yeah. Do what I did. Just Google it. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks to everybody who popped in to watch us yatter on about tabletop role-playing games. Thank you for joining us for my very first YouTube live stream. Hopefully this won't be the last, but yeah. Where can people find you, Kat?
People can find me on Twitter at Catlingun. That's CATLING gun. Pew, pew, pew. I am the host king of the podcast Sword of Symphonies, where my cool friends playtest my good game. And it's an actual playtest. It's a lot of fun. And I am on the live stream Edge of the World Sunday nights, which I'll tweet about. Follow me on Twitter. I tweet about everything. It'll be fun.
Cool. And well, if people want to find me, they can find me on Twitter as at DorkLordCanada. And then from there, yeah, you can find links to everything else that I'm doing. I write sometimes on renaissancegamer.ca. I also write pure bi-weekly articles for The Rat Hole, which is a great tabletop game review site. So they have a bunch of other people who write really excellent game reviews, and I occasionally write game reviews, but mostly I just pop in with my old man in the hobby rantings and talk about whatever whatever has caught my eye that week. And very soon, I can't say too much more about it, but you will be able to find me on Monday nights on a actual play live stream that uses the Call of Cthulhu rules system, but we're not actually playing Call of Cthulhu.
Nice.
There's no mythos involved whatsoever. But it's a wonderful steampunk universe that we're going to be playing around in. So you can come and follow the adventures of my Scottish doctor, William Lindsay. And I'll post information about that later on.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
I think now is the time where we wave a lot and say goodbye to everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Ready? Bye.
Bye.